Can you hear me okay? Is that all working all right? Did he ask the same question? Oh, it's time to start. Okay, yes, I got you. Okay. All right, very good. Well, we're studying in 1 Kings. We are going to be starting this evening around chapter 15 of 1 Kings. And we have begun a study of what we sometimes call the divided kingdom. The divided kingdom, meaning the northern and southern kingdoms, or the tribe of Israel and the tribe of Judah. And we've been studying what happened post-Solomon, and we've considered Rehoboam, who succeeded his father, and also Jeroboam, who was chosen by the Lord once the kingdom was divided. He was the one who would lead the northern kingdom. And so we're going to be studying for a little while about some of those kings up north, those in Israel. And what do we know was true for all those kings? What did they have in common? Every one of them up north. Evil, weren't they? Every one of them did evil in the sight of the Lord. They were idolaters particularly. And so there was a lot of chaos at times in the region. And of course, one would try to pull another away from the allegiance that one had, as we'll see tonight in some of these episodes. And so it was a very, very dark time in the history of Israel, and particularly as we talk about the northern kingdom. So Jeroboam had been selected by God to lead the northern kingdom. But we know that Jeroboam was a man who did not follow after the commands of God. God rejected him. And we're noticing that once Jeroboam died, that his son, Nadab, followed him. Verse 25, he began to reign over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah. Well, we're going to leave Asa, the king of Judah, alone for the moment so that we can look at some of these other kings. Now, we don't have time to spend on each king. There is not a lot said about each king. We just know that they have this in common. They do not follow the Lord, and they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And it says of Nadab, he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Verse 26 of 1 Kings 15. Walked in the way of his father, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. Now, how did Jeroboam make Israel sin? Through idolatry, didn't he? And the change of worship. We talked about that last week, didn't we? Change the worship site, the time of the worship. And so a key part of Jeroboam's error was regarding the place of worship and the time of worship and the priesthood, you remember? And so Nadab continued in that. Well, one thing that is true, if these kings don't have, they don't have the favor of God, they're not going to prosper, are they? And these kings did not have the favor of God, and therefore they did not prosper. And so you've got one in verse 27, Baasha, who is going to assassinate Nadab. Nadab only reigned for just a short period of time, about 2 years. And in fulfillment of what God had said, the entire house of Jeroboam was destroyed, wasn't it? Because of this one named Baasha, but really God was behind that too. Now keep in mind that there was a son of Jeroboam named Abijah, who was a good young man, but his life was taken because of the deeds of his father. And so he died, and then his brother Nadab became the king, and Nadab is assassinated by Baasha, and that ended the line of Jeroboam. Okay, so that ended. Well, then there was one named Elah. Elah followed his father Baasha, and then he was assassinated by a military commander by the name of Zimri. Zimri, he reigned for only 7 days. So you see the chaos that's going on here. Zimri reigned for 7 days, and he actually would take his own life when he saw that the kingdom would be taken from him. He set himself afire and the entire palace, and so he died. And who was it that overtook Zimri? It was Omri. Omri took Zimri's place. Verse 18, it came to pass when Zimri saw that the city was taken, that he went into the palace of the king's house and burnt the king's house over him with fire, and died. And for his sins which he sinned in doing evil in the sight of the Lord, and walking in the way of Jeroboam, and in his sin which he did to make Israel sin. And so Zimri likewise was an ungodly man. But here is Omri. Well, maybe Omri will change things, right? No, it's not going to happen. There's a civil war ignited between Omri and a man named Tibni. Verse 22. It would be several years before Omri could claim the throne for certain. His army chose him to be the king, but this Tibni also was claiming to be king. A civil war ensued. Omri came out on top, and he would also change the capital from Tirzah to Samaria. Now, at an earlier time, Shechem was the capital, of course, but then it became Tirzah during the days of Jeroboam, and now the Samaria would become the capital, and that's where it would remain until the Assyrians would overcome the northern kingdom in 721 BC. And probably Samaria was the best capital city of the three because it was the most fortified. But notice verse 25. Omri wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord, and notice this, and did worse than all that were before him. Now, this man, Omri, must have really been evil. It appears that God does say some are more evil than others, right? And Omri was one of them. And so we've noticed already the sins of Jeroboam and those that followed him. And now we come to Omri, and we find out that he's more evil than any of the others. And so likewise, he's an idolater. He corrupts the worship. He's pagan in every way. And God, of course, is not pleased with him either. Well, his son will follow him, and that's where we want to pick up tonight, because that's Ahab. That's right, Ahab. And all of us, I think, are familiar with Ahab. But before we are introduced in this particular study to Ahab, we want to also pay attention to the great prophet that arrives on the scene, because you cannot study these kings of northern Israel without studying the great Elijah, right? Elijah. And so Elijah, chapter 17, verse 1 is introduced to us. And Elijah is someone who, in the biblical narrative, rises on the scene, and just almost out of nowhere. But he is someone with whom the kings of Israel will have to contend. And he says this to King Ahab, "As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word." In other words, there's going to be a famine, right? And a famine because God is not going to bless his people while they're living in rebellion to him. And it says, "The word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there." So, who's taking care of Elijah during this time? God is taking care of Elijah. And then there is the account of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. And so here is a woman who has a boy, a son. And he said, "I want you to help this widow woman, and she's going to help you. You can help her." And so the widow woman is very poor. I mean, the famine in the land, poverty-stricken time. And so God's going to prove something through Elijah. And he begins with this account of the widow of Zarephath. And she has very little food, and all she has is for herself and for whom? Her son, right? And yet Elijah comes and he says, "I want to also partake. Here's what I want you to prepare for me." And she says, well, really, verse 12, she just got enough for herself and for a little boy, right? And yet Elijah says, "I want you not to fear. I want you to do what I've told you to do. You cook for yourself, make something for me. And so he says, you will be fine. The Lord has said that you're going to be all right. You got to trust me. But what happened eventually? Her son died, didn't he? So it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress' house, fell sick, and his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. Now, Elijah had told her all was going to be well. Now look what's happened. The son is sick, and so she, for a moment, turns on Elijah. And she said, what have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou coming to me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son? In other words, she's saying, I wish you had not come here. I wish you'd not come here. But now look what has happened. And so Elijah knows what he's going to do. And it's going to bring glory and honor unto God. He said, give me thy son. And he took him out of her bosom, carried him up into a loft where he abode, laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son? So now Elijah takes it to whom? To God, doesn't he? He doesn't understand this either. And here's what God's going to do. Notice in verse 21, Elijah stretches himself upon the child 3 times, cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. And God heard Elijah. Now, this is a reminder to the widow Zarephath and to others that Elijah is the man of God. Elijah took the child after he revived, after his life came back to him, brought him down out of the chamber into the house, delivered him unto his mother, and Elijah said, See, thy son liveth. And the woman said to Elijah, Now by this I know that thou art a man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in thy mouth is truth. So she believes it. She knows that Elijah is a true prophet, doesn't she? And that's very, very important. Because now we move into chapter 18. And in chapter 18, we will notice that there is a great famine in the land. And the people are crying out to what God? To Baal, aren't they? To Baal. Baal worship was prominent. Now, the governor of Ahab's house is a man named Obadiah, not to be confused with the prophet Obadiah. And Ahab, what does Ahab think about Elijah? What does he say about him? You're the troubler, right? You're the troubler in Israel. And of course Elijah says, I'm not the troubler. You're the one that's bringing all this evil upon the land. And so Obadiah is a man who fears God, but he's also fearful of the king, and he wants to have the favor of the king. Well, there's going to be here in this great chapter a battle fought between the prophets of Baal and Elijah. And so verse 17 of 1 Kings 18 is when Ahab says, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And Elijah says, I've not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. And so now he gets together with the prophets of Baal on what place? Mount Carmel, right? Up on Mount Carmel. How many prophets of Baal, verse 19? 450, aren't they? And so 450. Now, mention should also be made here about Ahab. He is primarily directed to do what he does by whom? He's a weak man. Who is it that's really the power behind the throne? Jezebel, isn't it? All right, we'll see that as the text continues. And so Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, gather the prophets together into Mount Carmel. This is going to be a great contest here. Now, here's what Elisha says. There's a sermon in this. How long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people were what? Silent, weren't they? They didn't say anything. All right, now he sets this before them. Do you want to follow God? Then you need to start following God. You're going to follow Baal? Then follow Baal. But let's see who really has the power. Let's see who has the power. And so he says, let them therefore give us 2 bullocks. Let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, cut it in pieces, lay it on the wood, put no fire under. And I will dress the other bullock and lay it on wood and put no fire under. And ye call on your name of your gods, and I'll call on the name of the Lord. And the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, It is well spoken. All right. Now they're convinced that this is a good way to determine who really is God. They're not sure. And so Elijah reasons with him. How long are you going to halt between these two opinions? That there's a God in Israel or that Baal's a God? And that's the one you should follow. And that all these prophets of Baal are convincing the people they ought to follow Baal. And so Elijah, the great prophet, says, let's test this out. Let's see. Well, here in this particular text, we learn that Elijah is going to engage in a little bit of biblical, scriptural, sacred sarcasm. Okay? Let's think about this just for a moment. I remember Brother Elkins would say something like this to those so-called miracle workers. Let's go out to the cemetery, and you think you can perform the miraculous. You tell the fella to get up that's buried there, and I'll tell him to stay down, and we'll see who has the power, right? And we know how that would turn out. All right. Well, Elijah's doing something the same. You call on Baal. And so verse 26, they took the bullock which was given them, they dressed it, called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. Now just getting this in your mind as how silly this must have been. All right? They are believers in the idol Baal. And they're calling on Baal to deliver fire from heaven and destroy the altar so we can see who really is God. And so Elijah just stands back and he lets them have their moment. Okay? And so morning even until noon, all morning long, they're shouting and calling. Don't you know that started getting aggravating after a while? I mean annoying as you listen to this. It came to pass at noon that Elijah finally says something. He mocked them. And he said, cry aloud, for he is a God. Maybe he's talking. He can't hear you. Or maybe he is pursuing. Maybe he's after something. And out, engaged in pursuit of something. Or maybe he's on a long journey. Or maybe he's sleeping and needs to be awakened. He is, no doubt, engaged in saying things to try and get them to think. Okay? And you see how foolish you're being, is what Elijah is saying. Now notice, once you head down this path of idolatry, notice that the text says they cried aloud, they kept on crying out, and cut themselves. This is barbaric, isn't it? They cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets till the blood gushed out upon them. That's not normal, is it? There are some people that will engage in that kind of activity today for whatever reason. Some are idolaters. And harming the body, that's not good, that's not right, that's not biblical. And so that they're even cutting themselves, trying to prove themselves to this false God, that they worship him and honor him, so please heed their cry. And it came to pass when midday was past, they prophesied unto the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto it. Well, you know the people's eyes are big. You know that they are really interested in this. This has gotten the attention of so many people. They've witnessed all this that's going on. And Elijah says, I want you to come near. I don't want you to miss this. And repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order, cut the bullock in pieces, laid him on the wood, and said, fill 4 barrels of water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice on the wood. Now we're really going to test it, aren't we? All right? So far, nothing's happened. But just so you will know that I am going to be at the least advantage possible, Elijah says, let's soak this with water. Pour it on the burnt sacrifice. Pour it on the wood. Do it a second time, he says. Do it a third time. And the water ran about the altar, filled the trench also with water. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and I have done all these things that thou wert. here is Elijah, who is so very, very strong. I preached not long ago in a summer series about Elijah. And in this chapter, he's Elijah the victor. Elijah the victor. He's going to become Elijah the discouraged. But here, he's at Mount Carmel, dealing with these prophets of Baal, and God is listening to him. He cries on God to hear him. And verse 38, the fire of the Lord fell, consumed the burnt sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, what did they do? They fell on their face and said, the Lord, He is the God. The Lord, He is the God. So at this particular moment, having demonstrated the power of the Almighty by the hand of Elijah and from the direction of Elijah, God's people see, wait a minute, we're wrong. We need to worship the true God of Israel, the one who's blessed us in the past. And what happened to the prophets of Baal? Elijah says, don't let any of them escape. Elisha brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. And Elisha said to Ahab, get thee up and eat and drink, for there's a sound of abundance of rain. The people have repented, haven't they? And therefore God's going to bless them. There's been this famine. Doesn't James talk about this, you know? About the space of 3.5 years, and then the rain would come. And so Ahab went up to eat and to drink. Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. He cast himself down upon the earth, put his face between his knees, and he said to his servant, go now look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there's nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. It came to pass the 7th time, behold, there riseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, go up and say unto Ahab, prepare thy chariot, get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was great rain. Now, it all came about through natural process, didn't it? And yet God was behind it all. And so Ahab rode, went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. He girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So, the famine is over. By the demonstration of the power of God, we see that the people turn back to God, at least momentarily. And here is Ahab, who is going to tell this to Jezebel, but Jezebel has no use for whom? Elijah. All right? Elijah. She comes from a family of Baal worshipers, doesn't she? And so she does not have any pity whatsoever for Elijah. Now, it could be that maybe Ahab might have had some change of heart somewhat if he hadn't been pushed by Jezebel all the time. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. I wonder if Ahab went back excitedly, said, look what's happened. He's slain all the prophets with the sword. And so Jezebel sent a message to Elijah when she heard that. She didn't hear anything about truth, did she? She didn't hear about what really happened. She just knew the prophets of Baal were dead. She was a Baal worshiper. So let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them, but more about this time. What gods? They've already been shown to be nothing. And so here she is saying, so let the gods do to me, if by tomorrow I make not thy life as the life of those that you just slain. In other words, I'm going to kill you. Well, then let's think about Elijah for just a moment. Elijah has just done, he's just behaved so admirably, so courageously. I mean, he's done what would be very difficult for the rest of us to do. And that is by himself, no other human being with him, stood with God on Mount Carmel in the face of all those prophets of Baal and brought them to shame and destroyed them. And now we're going to find that he becomes scared to death of an evil woman. Now, she's not ordinary, right? There may be many evil women, just like there are many evil men in our world, but it's hard to find someone as evil as old Jezebel. And her day's coming, but it hasn't yet. And so Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you, Elijah. That's not Ahab. It's Jezebel that's talking. And when he saw that or heard that, he arose, and notice this, went for his life. Now he's running. If Elijah had the power to overwhelm the prophets of Baal, surely he'd handle the queen, but he doesn't think so. But don't forget his humanity here. Still a man, isn't he? He still has that which he fears. And part of that which he fears is her threats, because he knows what an evil woman she is. The text says he went about a day's journey into the wilderness. He came and sat down under a juniper tree. And then it's interesting what he does here. He requested for himself that he might die. All right? He is now very lonely. He's gone from feeling like the victor to feeling like the vanquished. And so sometimes after a great, great victory comes a moment of defeat. And he was no doubt excited because of what happened on Mount Carmel. But now here's Jezebel seeking his life. And what does he say? Lord, let me die. Now, did he really mean that? No, he's been running for his life. Some people may make a statement like that, and you have to believe the person just might be serious and it causes concern. I don't think Elijah really thought about taking his life. I think he's just having a pity party. And I am not speaking harshly against the great prophet Elijah when I say that. He's still a man. And so he says, it's enough now, Lord, take away my life. I'm not better than my fathers. I can't deal with this. I can't handle it. And so as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, then an angel touched him and said to him, rise and eat. And there's a little cake baked on the coals, cruse of water. And he did eat and drink, and he laid down again. The angel Lord came again, rise and eat. And he arose and did eat and drink. And went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. And he came thither unto a cave. He's still on the run, isn't he? And he lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said unto him, what doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altar, slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I, only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. He thinks he's the only one, doesn't he? You know, you could get in that situation at times, thinking I'm the only one that wants to do right. Nobody else is interested in right. I'm all by myself. Nobody else is interested in righteousness. Nobody else is interested in the spiritual. Nobody wants to serve God but poor me. I'm the only one. And so the text continues. Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. The Lord was not in an earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped up his face in his mantle, and went out and stood in the entering of the cave. And behold, there was a voice unto him and said, what doest thou here, Elijah? He said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said unto him, go return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus. When thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi thou shalt appoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abimalohola thou shalt appoint to be prophet in thy room. And so Abel-Beholah. And it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. Now look at verse 18. Yet have I left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him. So the point that God makes to Elisha here is he's not all alone. There are others also who have not done this. and that have not followed after Baal. And so Elijah needs to take comfort in that fact. And so Elijah is someone who, like us, can go through a moment of great victory, and then all of a sudden great anguish, feeling alone. And there's a lot to be said here about Elijah's loneliness, because if Elijah can be lonely, doesn't that mean the rest of us can find time to be lonely as well? That there are times when we're going to feel that God has left us, that God's not listening, that God's not paying attention, and that we're all alone. Well, we come to chapter 21. Let's go over a few chapters as we continue to just survey what's going on here. And we're continuing to talk about King Ahab. Now remember that Ahab he's a wicked king, no doubt about it. And he's married to an even more wicked woman. Her name is Jezebel. And she's the power behind the throne. And she is the one who really does encourage him in engaging in really what's despicable behavior. Now we notice this particularly in chapter 21 when we read about Naboth, who had a vineyard. All right, Naboth has a vineyard. Now the way Jezebel sees this, everything in the land belongs to she and Ahab, right? And so this vineyard that belongs to Naboth, the text says that Ahab wanted it. Verse 2, he says, "Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs." And, you know, he even goes as far as saying, you know, "I'll give thee the worth of it in money." Well, nothing wrong with that, right? I'll buy it from you. Okay? If there's something that somebody has and you really like it, you say, "I'd like to have it." You can't steal it, but you could say, "I'll bargain with you," right? And so here's Ahab just saying, you know, "All right, I'd like to have that." Nothing wrong with Ahab desiring it. And he said, "I'll even pay for it." And Naboth said, "The Lord forbid me that I should give the inheritance to my fathers unto thee." So we can understand Naboth's concern. He said, "No, this is my inheritance, and it's not for sale." And so Ahab, if he was really like Jezebel, now this is not defending him in any way, but if Ahab was really like Jezebel, just go ahead and kill him right there on the spot, right? But Ahab doesn't do that. He pouts, you know. Ahab came into his house, and he was heavy, the text says. That means his heart was heavy. He was displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. And he said, "I'll not give thee the inheritance of my fathers." And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face and would eat no bread. So that's how pitiful he is. He comes home pouting, as Miss June said. And he gets home and he says, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go lay down because my feelings are hurt. I really wanted that." Very covetous. He has everything. He's the king, but he wants this that doesn't belong to him. And so Jezebel comes in. "Why is your spirit so sad you've not even eaten any food? What's wrong with you?" And he said, "Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, said to him, Give me thy vineyard for money." Can't you help me here? I was going to give him some money. He wouldn't even take my money for it. He said, "I will not give you my vineyard." And I'm hurt. So I'm going to bed. Well, Jezebel, she doesn't like it. I mean, you can just almost sense Jezebel. Get up. Get up. And Jezebel said, "Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Aren't you the king? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I'll give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. If you can't go take it, then I'll get it for you." All right? Well, she wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal. She's taking care of business for old King Ahab. And she said, "Proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high among the people." Think about this kind of mind that conceives the things that she does. She wrote in the letter saying, "Proclaim a fast, set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him, to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him that he may die." Did Naboth blaspheme the king? No, he didn't do that. Naboth just said, "This is my inheritance. I'm not going to sell it." Did Ahab know that? Ahab knew that. Ahab knew there was nothing wrong with Naboth saying what he did. And so she says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to assassinate his character. We're going to tell a story about him that's not true. And so here's what you're going to take him and say, this man blasphemed God and the king. Well, that's what they'd say about Jesus, wouldn't they? You know, Jesus had blasphemed God by making himself equal with God by saying he was the Son of God. Well, here's an Old Testament account of Jezebel doing this to Naboth. The men of the city, verse 11, even the elders and the nobles who were the inhabitants of the city did as Jezebel had said unto them. And it was written in the letters which she had sent unto him. They proclaimed a fast, set Naboth on high among the people. There came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him. And the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Now, you think for a moment, these people are idolaters too. And sons of Belial, wicked men, and yet they no doubt, probably, without a doubt, fear, particularly Jezebel. They know her reputation. So here they are in a dire situation too. What's going to happen if they don't do that? They'll die, right? I mean, people's lives are constantly being threatened by wicked Queen Jezebel. If you don't do what she says, then you'll die, all right? And so she said what she did earlier about Elijah. She was wanting to kill him. And so here's what happened. They carried him forth out of the city, stoned him with stones, and he died. Sometimes innocent people suffer even with death, don't they? Here is Naboth, nothing said against his character. He just was minding his own business. And Ahab wanted the vineyard. Ahab, to his credit, didn't kill him. He just was sour about the whole thing. But Jezebel did. And she then said, then they sent to Jezebel saying, Naboth is stoned. That is, he's been stoned to death. And it came to pass when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth is not alive, but he's dead. I've taken care of this for you. That's what Queen Jezebel is saying. Well, who else knows about all of this? Yeah, who told him? Who knows above all? Who knows everything's going on? God does, doesn't he? The word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Naboth, he had a defender in the Lord. And Elijah is going to take care of this situation. And the word of the Lord came to him, verse 17. Verse 18, go down, meet Ahab, king of Israel, which is in Samaria. He is in the vineyard of Naboth, whither he's gone down to possess it. Now God says that still belongs to whom? He's down in Naboth's vineyard, right? It's not King Ahab's. God doesn't recognize it as such. He says, so Naboth Ahab is excited because Jezebel comes and she says, it's your vineyard. I took care of it for you. Naboth is dead. And what does Ahab do? He evidently doesn't say anything to the queen like, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have taken this into your own hands. He doesn't say anything like that. No, he goes and possesses it. But here comes the man of God. The man of God to talk to him about it. That's what we'll pick up next week.